The White House press conference had begun like any other ordinary day. However, no one could have predicted that within minutes, tensions would reach their peak, and an event that millions would debate would unfold. The two figures facing off were the White House's powerful advisor, Stephenmiller, and the ambitious journalist, Daniel Kaya. This debate was not just a simple policy explanation. It would challenge the country's immigration policies, American values, and even the very limits of justice. And no one expected the outcome to be so shocking. The press room was as crowded as ever. Journalists had prepared their questions, and cameras were already rolling. As Stephenmiller, the president's advisor, stepped up to the podium, his eyes locked onto Daniel Kaya, seated in the front row. Daniel was known for his harsh criticisms of immigration policies, and today he was determined to corner Miller. Daniel took the microphone and spoke in a clear, firm voice. Daniel, Mr. Miller, your administration is trying to radically change the immigration system. Yet the Statue of Liberty says, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free." But you are introducing new rules, such as an English language requirement. Aren't you changing America's traditional values? The room fell silent in an instant. Cameras zoomed in on Miller. Everyone was waiting to see how he would respond. Miller smirked slightly. As he let his gaze sweep over Daniel, he spoke in a firm yet confident tone. Stephen, first let's talk about history, Daniel. The poem you're referring to was not originally part of the Statue of Liberty. It was added later and has never been an official part of U.S. immigration law. Daniel shook his head in frustration. Daniel, but its symbolic meaning is significant. Hasn't America always been a beacon of hope for immigrants? Miller suddenly placed his hand on the table, his voice turning sharper. Stephen, all right, then let's look at the numbers. In the 1970s, the U.S. admitted 300,000 immigrants per year. By the 1990s, that number increased to 500,000. Today, we are admitting over 1 million people annually. Now tell me, Daniel, at what point did this become against American values? How many immigrants is enough, in your view? The room went dead silent. A few journalists hurriedly scribbled notes. Daniel stared at Miller, momentarily caught off guard, but he quickly gathered himself and pressed forward. Daniel, are you saying you only want immigrants who speak English or are highly skilled? Doesn't that sound like a racist policy? Miller let out a small chuckle and shook his head. Stephen, Daniel, that is an astonishingly biased assumption. Millions of people from all over the world speak English. They are not just from England or Australia. What you're suggesting is nothing but an insult to both the American people and immigrants themselves. Daniel took a deep breath. He sensed that something was not going his way, but he steadied himself. Daniel, but your policies make it harder for low-income immigrants to enter the country. Isn't that against the principle of equal opportunity? Is it fair to shut the door on poor but hard-working people? Miller narrowed his eyes, raised his eyebrows slightly, and spoke with even greater emphasis. Stephen, you're wrong, Daniel. Open border policies hurt low-income American workers and legal immigrants the most. They reduce the availability of low-wage jobs and drive down salaries. These policies exist to ensure that those who come here legally can succeed. Moreover, uncontrolled immigration increases crime rates and economic instability. Is that your idea of justice? Whispers spread among the journalists. Daniel's face tensed, but before he could say anything, Miller continued without hesitation. Miller, immigration is not a right, it is a privilege. If we want every immigrant who comes to the U.S. to succeed, we need a system in place. If they arrive unable to find work, without knowing the language, and become economically dependent, are we truly helping them, or are we setting them up for failure? Daniel quickly glanced at his notes, preparing to ask another question, but Miller didn't give him the chance. You call it unfair, but the reality is that uncontrolled and unrestricted immigration harms immigrants the most. A government's duty is to protect its own citizens first. America can be a land of opportunity for everyone, but not if it descends into chaos by ignoring its own laws. The press room was holding its breath. Daniel's expression faltered. At first, he had thought he would corner Miller, but now he was the one feeling trapped. After a brief silence, murmurs began to rise across the room. Daniel Kaya's hands trembled slightly as he gripped his notes. He locked eyes with Miller, but no words came to him. Just then, another journalist raised his hand and spoke up. Journalist, Mr. Miller, are you saying that this policy is not about targeting immigrants, but about protecting the American people? Miller nodded. Absolutely. If America's borders are not controlled, the ones who will suffer the most are American workers and the legal immigrants who follow the rules. A system without enforcement puts both new arrivals and longtime citizens at risk. We are here to maintain order. Daniel, in a final effort, attempted to make one last move. Daniel, but when we look at America's history, we see that immigrants helped build this country. Are you trying to stop this natural process with artificial barriers? Miller smirked slightly and shook his head. It wasn't just immigrants that built America. It was a structured and controlled system. An unregulated immigration system leads to chaos. We are here to create order, not disorder. You should conduct proper research and analysis before making such claims just for the sake of stirring controversy. If you truly want order, then report the facts and do your homework. Daniel's face flushed red. Today he had planned to corner Miller, but the opposite had happened. The cameras were still rolling. This debate would be talked about for days. This historic confrontation sent shockwaves across America. What do you think? Did Stephenmiller genuinely defend immigration policies, or did he take an overly harsh and unjust stance? What are your thoughts on immigration? Share your opinions in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more content like this. See you in the next video. Take care.